If I didn't say anything, you would interpret it as the hip hop is fine with his behaviors. There's no one else being vocal. Favorite villain? I kind of like Diddy.
50 Cent is revealing what truly goes on behind the scenes in hip-hop, and now the entire industry can feel the pressure mounting. Rappers are starting to get nervous. Some are even slipping into private messages, almost pleading not to be included in his upcoming documentary.
I like the idea of it being exciting, and I picked this project and started working on it about 5 months before I found out.
But 50 is already releasing unseen clips, and what's being revealed is shaking the ground beneath everyone's feet. Let's get into it. The setup, 50 Cent, the Bad Boy founder, and the long road to this moment. This tension didn't just appear overnight. It goes back as far as 2006, when 50 dropped a track accusing the Bad Boy founder of knowing who was responsible for the killing of the notorious B.I.G. Even before that, there was a moment 50 says completely changed how he viewed the mogul. The Bad Boy founder once suggested taking him shopping. Sounds harmless on the surface, but 50 didn't see it that way.
How did you get that footage of Diddy?
I figured most journalists would not disclose their sources.
He saw it as a test, like maybe, you'll come play with me. He turned it down, and from that moment something didn't feel right. They never had a full-blown clash, but the tension was there. Something everyone in the industry could sense. 50 later explained it clearly. It wasn't typical beef, it was discomfort. And when that kind of discomfort sits and builds for 20 years, it doesn't just fade away, it eventually explodes. That explosion came in November 2023 when Cassie Ventura filed a lawsuit against the Bad Boy founder detailing years of alleged abuse. The case was settled within just 24 hours, but the details didn't disappear. The allegations broke open a long-standing wall of silence that had surrounded the mogul for decades.
Does he know y'all have this in the doc?
I would doubt he knows.
And 50 was watching closely. He said the lawsuit was the exact moment he and director Alexandria Stapleton first seriously discussed creating a documentary. The idea had already been developing for months before Stapleton even came on board. 50 described his approach as being in the Quincy Jones style. Find the best person, bring them in, and trust that the outcome will be powerful. Stapleton, the Emmy-winning showrunner, became that key piece from the very beginning. From the start, 50 understood one thing clearly. Timing was everything.
Went away.
Got in the car and said, I feel like I need to wash, like I'm dirt. That was, it shows you his character.
When production began, the Bad Boy founder hadn't been arrested yet. No federal charges, no indictment. His influence was still strong, still reaching everywhere. As Stapleton later explained, his power and reach were fully intact. Because of that, people were afraid. The team spent months reaching out, calls, emails, quiet conversations, but many never appeared on camera. Some sources would only speak behind the scenes while others refused altogether. The few who did go on record were former associates, artists, employees, and insiders, people who had carried these stories for years and finally felt safe enough to speak.
Was that the reason for including it?
Yeah. I mean, what's the odds that you would do that? I felt like a cat.
Part of that was because 50 was involved. He confirmed it himself. People trusted him. They believed he wouldn't back down or hide the truth. Then everything shifted. In September 2024. The Bad Boy founder was arrested on federal charges tied to sex trafficking and racketeering, with the arrest taking place on September 16. In the days leading up to it, something unexpected was happening. He was filming himself or having someone film him, almost like he was documenting his final moments of freedom. It felt controlled, intentional, like he still believed he could shape the narrative. But that footage didn't stay in his hands.
He had to pick and choose things, like even in an area where he chooses to date people who he knows previously dated someone.
Somehow that footage ended up with 50 Cent, and that raised a major question. How did he get it? Whenever he was asked, 50 stayed calm and tight-lipped. He compared it to a journalist protecting a source. But what he did confirm was this. The footage was obtained legally with full rights, and the identity of the person who handed it over was carefully protected. The material had originally been filmed by a videographer hired by the Bad Boy founder for his own documentary project.
This documentary is about people being able to tell their truth or tell their version of the story.
But that project reportedly fell apart over a payment dispute. And that's when the material was legally transferred to 50. The wild part? The Bad Boy founder had no idea anyone else even had it. Then came December 2, 2025. The docuseries dropped and instantly hit #1 on Netflix in the United States, even outperforming Stranger Things, which had dominated for years. The reaction was immediate. The Bad Boy founder's legal team fired off a cease and desist within hours.
The only thing I wish we were able to have Diddy be in the doc.
They called it a shameful hit piece and claimed it relied on stolen footage. But Netflix didn't budge. The series stayed live and suddenly the industry had nowhere to hide. Now here's where things really take a turn. The footage itself, what it actually showed, was unlike anything hip-hop had seen before. This was a man who built an empire on controlling his image, someone known for mastering perception. And now he was caught on camera completely unfiltered. The irony was brutal. He filmed most of it himself. The previously unseen hotel footage, captured at the Park Hyatt in New York just days before his arrest, shows him in full crisis mode.
If I didn't say anything, you would interpret it as the hip hop is fine with his behaviors. There's no one else being involved.
Emergency calls with lawyers, intense talks with publicists, strategy sessions about flipping the narrative, all while federal investigators were closing in from Miami, Los Angeles, and New York. At the same time, the most talked about moment came from a speakerphone call with his attorney. He was frustrated, saying the plan wasn't working and that something had to change. But even that wasn't the most shocking part. The line that defined the entire documentary came during a private conversation about media strategy. He said he needed someone experienced in the dirtiest of dirtiest dirty business of media and propaganda. That moment, raw, unfiltered, became the image people couldn't forget. It wasn't branding. It wasn't polished. It was the machine behind everything, exposed in his own voice. Director Alexandria Stapleton later explained this in a December 2025 interview on MSNBC.
Like they think that they are telling something, or just mind your business type of.
She explained that this is exactly why the footage mattered so much. The Bad Boy founder had spent years documenting himself. Reality shows, behind-the-scenes clips, carefully crafted content. That habit created a blind spot. He believed he could always edit things later, cut out anything damaging and stay in control. Even as investigators were preparing to knock on his door, he still thought he held the power. Stapleton described him as someone who always believed he could rewrite the story. But this time the camera kept rolling.
Are you petty?
I accept that. I'll take that. I'll wear that. I'm fine.
When he forgot, and one of the most unforgettable sequences didn't happen in the boardroom, it happened in Harlem. He went out into the streets, reconnecting with fans, smiling, hugging people, showing love, projecting that familiar image. But behind the scenes, everything was falling apart after the crowd cleared. He got back into his car. And what happened next is exactly why Stapleton included it. The same man who had just spent all that time connecting with people suddenly asked for hand sanitizer. It's been #1 on Netflix. Did you actually expect it to be as big as it got? I expected it to be big. Then he said he needed to take a bath. He said he felt dirty from the contact. That moment hit hard. It showed the gap between the public image and the private reality in a way no statement ever could. That gap between the public performance and the private reaction. That's the whole point of the documentary, boiled down into one moment. And 50 Cent didn't hide that. When asked if he included it on purpose, he made it clear that scene was all about showing true character. 50 said it straight up. That was the moment the Bad Boy founder forgot the cameras were rolling, and it revealed everything you needed to see. No filter, no control, just raw behavior caught in real time. And it didn't stop there. The footage also shows the mogul reacting as new lawsuits started hitting him. Stapleton described one specific moment during her interview on MSNBC when he got news of another civil case. You could see the shift instantly. His armor, as she called it, was cracked. That shock didn't last long. It flipped into anger fast for someone who spent decades building an image of being untouchable. Watching that switch happen live on his own footage made this documentary different from anything before it. When Ivory Melber pushed 50 about how he even got this footage, 50 didn't flinch. He smiled, referenced Harvey Lavin from TMZ, talked about protecting sources, and then kept it simple. When asked directly, he just said, "I got it." That was it. Meanwhile, the Bad Boy founder's legal team reacted immediately, filing a cease and desist the same day the series dropped. They called it stolen footage in an unauthorized project. Netflix responded just as fast, saying everything was legally secured and no advanced warning was required. The series stayed up, and within 24 hours it shot to #1 on Netflix, even beating out Stranger Things. For decades, the Bad Boy founder controlled his image carefully. But for 6 days in September 2024, the camera kept rolling. And this time the world saw everything he couldn't edit out. Now let's talk about who really got exposed. The title had rappers begging to stay out. But the truth is more complicated. Some revelations came directly from people who sat on camera and spoke openly, sharing stories that had been whispered in private for years. Other parts came from old footage, court documents, and clips no one had seen before. And then there's another layer. What didn't make it into the final cut? Names that were removed still found their way into conversation. Spreading point, one of the biggest moments came from Kirk Burroughs, a Bad Boy co-founder who had a falling out with the mogul years ago. He didn't hold back at all. He described a system built on control, humiliation, manipulation, and at times violence. According to him, people who stepped out of line were made into examples. But what really set everything off was what he said about Biggie and Tupac. He claimed the mogul was deeply jealous of their connection and even went as far as saying the Bad Boy founder had a lot to do with Tupac's death. Now, the documentary does not present that claim as proven fact. Even 50 acknowledged in the A.R. Melbourne interview that the Tupac case is still moving through the courts with legal proceedings ongoing at the time. But hearing that claim on a global Netflix platform hit differently. Another major voice was Aubrey O'Day from Donna D. Kane, a group created through the Moguls reality show. Her account was one of the most detailed in the series. She described messages, emails, and photos she says were sent to her, which she interpreted as pressure tied to her role as an artist. She claimed that when she didn't go along with it, she was removed from the group. Her story expanded the conversation beyond one relationship, suggesting a broader pattern being discussed in the documentary. Then there's Mark Curry, a former Bad Boy artist and author of Dancing with the Devil. He gave an inside look at how the label operated, talking about contracts, ghost production, and business practices he believed were unfair. Curry also placed himself at the scene of a 1995 shooting involving Suge Knight's bodyguard, a moment often mentioned in discussions about East Coast-West Coast tensions that added another layer of history to everything being unpacked. The docuseries also brought in voices like Eric Sermon, who gave context on the 1991 City College tragedy, along with Lil C, Day 26 members and Albure, who spoke about patterns in the moguls' personal relationships going back years. Even 2 jurors from the federal trial spoke publicly for the first time. One described the relationship between the Bad Boy founder and Cassie as 2 people in love. Another pointed out that domestic violence was not one of the charges in that specific case. Online reactions? People had strong opinions about those statements. And then there's the big question. Who got cut? One of the most talked about names was Meek Mill. 50 confirmed that around 15 celebrities were removed from the final version. He didn't go into detail about all the claims tied to them, just said the story had to stay focused. But the implication was clear. There may be more footage, more connections, more stories, but a 4-hour series can only hold so much. And what didn't air still managed to circulate in other ways. On The Breakfast Club, 50 was also asked about fairness. Should the Bad Boy founder have been included in telling his own story? His answer added another layer. 50 said the invitation was sent multiple times. His team reached out to the mogul's legal side again and again, offering a chance to participate. Every time the answer was no. So, what this documentary really exposed wasn't just individuals. It was a system. One powerful figure at the center, surrounded by an industry that stayed quiet for years. When the series dropped, the conversation exploded, and 2 big questions took over. First about the footage. Second about 50 himself. People started asking, is this snitching? Making a documentary about someone you've had issues with for over 20 years, right in the middle of their legal situation. For a lot of people in hip-hop, the answer was yes. But that reaction says more about the culture than it does about 50. And one of the loudest voices speaking on it? Joel Santana, aka Ja Rule. His history with 50 goes way back, long before any of this. Their issues started in 1999 over a chain, escalated into a stabbing incident at a New York studio in 2000, and turned into one of the most intense rap rivalries ever, filled with diss tracks and public shots. So when this documentary dropped and Ja Rule stepped in with his opinion, it wasn't just commentary, it was history stepping right back into the spotlight. Ja Rule was not about to stay quiet and miss this moment. On December 1, 2025, just one day before the series dropped, he went on X and called 50 Cent a rat. Always have been, always will be a rat. And he didn't stop there. 6 days later, he doubled down, calling him a dry snitch, and added a sharp comment. Let's not have selective outrage when it comes to domestic abuse. He didn't name anyone directly, but the message was clear. Others in the industry deserve just as much attention. Now, the word snitching in hip-hop isn't simple. It carries real weight. It's not just about talking to authorities. It comes from communities where people have long seen the system as something that harms more than it helps. In those environments, trusting the wrong person could cost you everything. That mindset made its way into the music and grew louder during the stop snitching era of the early 2000s, eventually becoming a shield. One that, in some cases, protected powerful figures from being questioned. Because when people say, snitching in a situation like this, what they're really saying is the code matters more than the accusations. 50 Cent didn't dodge that idea. He faced it head-on. His argument wasn't that the code itself is useless, but that in this situation silence started to look like support. According to that logic, every artist who stayed quiet, every figure who avoided the topic, was indirectly allowing the culture to absorb what was being said without challenge. The industry's reaction backed that up in a big way, and it made people uncomfortable. No public statements from Drake, nothing from Kendrick Lamar, no response from Jay-Z. Some of the biggest names connected to that world stayed completely silent. And the few who did speak? Most of them focused on 50's intentions instead of the actual claims being discussed. Dame Dash, who has openly criticized the Bad Boy founder in the past, rejected the documentary, but in doing so highlighted the exact issue people were debating. He framed 50 as someone trying to tear down another black man, calling him a dry snitch, and even criticized platforms like The Breakfast Club for giving the documentary attention. That argument leaned heavily on community loyalty over individual accountability. And when you apply that thinking in situations involving serious accusations, it starts to explain how silence can last for decades. Then came voices from inside the system. Maze and Shine, both former Bad Boy artists, spoke after the release, and what they said cut deeper than anything else. They didn't just point at one person, they pointed at everyone. One of the statements that stood out most was Nathy. They were all accomplices. Even the ones complaining. They were guarding while he was doing it. Everybody was a part of it. Nobody held him accountable. As long as they were benefiting. That line hit hard because the people who were part of that world were saying it openly. Then this wasn't just about one individual anymore. It was about an entire structure that people participated in, benefited from, and protected. Joe Budden was one of the few major voices who actually focused on the documentary itself. He called it a very well done piece, pushing back on the idea that it was just a hit job. He even pointed out that some viewers felt the Bad Boy founder didn't face enough consequences, referencing the outcome tied to lesser charges. Waka Flocka Flame also spoke out, saying the documentary completely changed how he views celebrities. He made it clear that if the allegations are true, he wouldn't stand beside the mogul under any circumstances, even if they had close ties. Marlon Wayans took a different angle, warning 50 about karma and framing the situation as personal. He described it as two men settling a long-standing score, calling it kicking a man while he's down. And 50, when asked directly if he was being petty, didn't dodge it. He gave a straight answer. No spin, no denial, no attempt to clean it up. That honesty played a big role in how people received the documentary because, at the end of the day, nobody could say 50 was pretending to be neutral. He made it clear he had history here and still moved forward anyway. But here's the key point. The footage, the interviews, the jurors, the former associates, the co-founder statements, all of that stood on its own. No matter who put it together, the material spoke loudly, and that created a strange reality where two things existed at the same time. Heavy backlash and massive success. Criticism everywhere, but also the #1 spot on Netflix. Now here's where things take another turn. On March 5, 2026, 50 posted something that got people talking again. It was a screenshot on Instagram with a headline claiming he was developing a surviving T.I. and Tiny documentary, but it was the caption that really grabbed attention. He wrote, "Remember how quiet I got before the Diddy doc? Thought I wasn't coming. I hope this doesn't mess up your promo tour. They're going to ask about your 20 sexual assault cases. You might want to talk to a crisis PR person." Then just like that, it was deleted. Too late. Screenshots had already spread everywhere. The timing wasn't random either. T.I., also known as Clifford Harris, was in the middle of promoting what he called his final album, Kill the King, with Pharrell Williams involved. And just like that, 50 made it clear this wasn't a one-time move. It looked like a pattern. 50 Cent picked the exact moment to cause maximum disruption. He brought old allegations involving T.I. and his wife Tiny Harris back into the spotlight, tying them to the same kind of documentary rollout that had just shaken the entire hip-hop world. On March 5, 2026, 50 dropped that teaser on Instagram, and his caption made it clear he was using the same playbook from the Bad Boy founder documentary. T.I. didn't wait to respond. He jumped on Instagram and fired back. "We can go bar for bar, hit for hit, or doc for doc. Either way, all you're going to do is show how much of a effing you is. Nobody fears you over here, boo-boo." On the surface he looked calm, but staying calm when the same person just released unseen footage that took down one of the biggest figures in hip-hop isn't easy. This clash didn't come out of nowhere either. It had been building all through early 2026. T.I. went on the Nightcap podcast, accused 50 of avoiding a fuse battle, and said he had lost respect for him. 50 responded in his usual style, posting unflattering images, memes, and even dragging T.I.'s family into it. He targeted Tiny and shared Peppy-style jokes, while also taking shots at T.I.'s son, King Harris. T.I. fired back hard, dropping 4 diss tracks back-to-back. War the Right One lessons and what bully sons do. King Harris and another figure, Demon, joined in and things escalated fast. At one point, lines were crossed that many in the industry felt went too far, especially when personal family references entered the mix. This wasn't just music anymore. It turned into something much heavier. Then suddenly on March 20, 2026, 50 went quiet musically. He deleted posts related to the feud and shifted focus back to his TV empire, announcing Power Legacy as a likely final chapter in the Star series. But even with all that, the documentary tease stayed loud. That single move ended up being the most impactful shot of the entire situation. Here's the key part. The allegations behind that tease weren't new. They traced back to February 2021 when attorney Tyrone Blackburn publicly represented over 11 women making claims against T.I. and Tiny. Those claims included accusations of drugging, coercion, and other serious misconduct, with timelines going back to around 2005. In May 2021, the LAPD opened an investigation, but it was later closed without charges citing legal time limits. A civil lawsuit filed in 2024 under California's look-back law was also dismissed in August that year. Throughout all of this, T.I. and Tiny strongly denied every claim, calling them false, fabricated, and attempts at extortion. As of March 18, 2026, there's no confirmed documentary in production. No director attached, no release date, no official rollout. Nothing beyond 50's deleted post. And that might be the most important detail of all. 50's current strategy doesn't actually require a finished documentary to work. Just the name, the idea, the threat of footage, the possibility of exposure. That alone can shift everything. It can interrupt an album rollout, drag old headlines back into the news, and force people into defensive mode without a single frame ever being released. That's a different kind of power. At 50 years old, 50 Cent is moving in a way hip-hop hasn't really seen before. He's not leading with diss tracks anymore. He's using long-form content, real footage, structured storytelling, and high-level production as his main weapon. An Emmy-winning director, multi-part series, carefully sourced material that people didn't even know existed, all packaged like a cultural event. He calls it telling the truth. His critics call it a personal vendetta with a big budget behind it. But one thing is clear. It works. The Bad Boy doc started with the Cassie lawsuit, built quietly over time, and dropped right when public attention was at its peak. Then the delivered footage no one expected pushed it straight to #1. And now it doesn't look like a one-time move. 50 has already hinted at a possible Jay-Z documentary next, suggesting this is just the beginning of a bigger strategy. The T.I. situation followed the exact same formula. Public tease, perfect timing, specific references to past allegations, and then silence. No follow-up, no confirmation, just enough to keep everyone watching closely. And that might be the smartest part of it all, because sometimes not saying anything else is louder than everything that came before. 50's legacy really sums up the whole mindset behind this move. In his view, the mogul wasn't someone to feel sorry for. He was the central antagonist, a powerful figure in a story that needed a dramatic ending, and 50 made sure it landed exactly like that. And the impact? It wasn't small. Around the time the documentary dropped, 50's streaming numbers jumped by about 30%. The series went on to become one of the most watched documentaries on Netflix across multiple regions, and that got people talking everywhere. In studios and offices behind closed doors. That there's a new kind of thinking happening in hip-hop now in this accountability era. The biggest move isn't dropping a diss track anymore. It's landing a Netflix deal and controlling the narrative on a global level. And here's the part that has everyone watching closely. The names that made it into those 4 episodes and the ones that didn't are all paying attention, because now the question isn't if more comes out. It's when. Who has the footage? What else is out there? And when does it drop? That's the question 50 Cent is leaving wide open. And he's clearly not rushing to answer it. If you made it this far, tap like, hit subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to see what's really going on.